Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Emily, and thanks for joining us today here on Westferry Times. We're getting into something pretty significant happening within the UK's LGBTQ plus community. Specifically, we're looking at the recent decision by Glasgow Pride, and actually several other major Pride events too, to ban political parties from taking part. And this seems largely driven by growing concerns around trans rights.
Yes, it's definitely a notable moment. It signals, I think, a real shift in how the community is engaging or perhaps disengaging with mainstream politics.
Absolutely. And to help us, really unpack this, we've been digging into news reports, analysis of the events, and the sort of wider political context. Our aim today is to understand the reasons behind these bans, see the bigger picture in UK politics, think about the potential impacts, and also grasp the different views within the LGBTQ plus community itself. And for some deeper insight, I'm really pleased to have Dr. James Thornton with us. He's a political analyst and a longtime advocate for LGBTQ plus rights. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's an important conversation, definitely.
Great. Okay, let's dive straight in. Glasgow Pride. What was the core reason they gave for this ban on political parties?
The main reason Glasgow Pride stated was centered on what they see as um, mounting challenges to transgender rights, and also a feeling of insufficient support coming from across the political spectrum, really. It wasn't, just a sudden thing. It felt more like a response built over time, a sense that having parties march wasn't really serving the community's needs anymore, especially for trans people.
Right, it wasn't just out of the blue, and there was a specific event recently that seems to have acted as a catalyst.
Precisely. A key factor was the UK Supreme Court ruling, the one that interpreted woman and sex under the Equality Act 2010, and critically defined those terms strictly biologically, which of course has huge implications for trans women, even those with gender recognition certificates, potentially excluding them from that legal definition in certain situations.
Hmm. So that ruling became a kind of focal point for Glasgow Pride, highlighting this perceived lack of political will to properly protect trans rights. What were the first reactions from politicians when Glasgow Pride made its announcement?
While they varied, as you probably expect, Patrick Harvey from the Scottish Greens gave a notable response. He said he was disappointed, naturally, given the history of political involvement in Pride. But importantly, he also said he respected the decision. And he specifically mentioned the erosion of trust between the community and political parties, which I think really hits the nail on the head here.
Yeah, that trust issue seems key. And this is where it gets really interesting because, as you hinted, Glasgow wasn't alone in this.
No, not at all. It clearly resonated. We saw Birmingham Pride, Brighton Pride, Pride in London, and Manchester Pride all follow suit with similar bans or restrictions on political party participation. This collective action, well, it really turns up the volume on the message, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So what's the common thread? What's the shared thinking behind these decisions across these major prides?
It really boils down to a deep dissatisfaction, I think, with how both the main liberal and conservative parties, and others too, have been handling transgender rights. There's just this growing sense of frustration, um, a feeling that there's been a lack of real tangible progress, and sometimes even steps backward on rights or protections.
So not just one law, but a kind of broader disillusionment with the political establishment's commitment. Could you maybe elaborate on the specific issues driving that? What are the main points of concern?
Yeah, a really central one is the perceived lack of movement on reforms like self-identification legislation, allowing trans people to legally change their gender based on their own declaration. Many people feel that despite years of talk and campaigning, progress has just stalled or even been actively blocked. And then there's the whole issue of access to gender-affirming healthcare.
Yeah.
Huge waiting lists, not enough funding, bureaucratic hurdles. It causes real distress for people needing medical transition. Those two things, self-ID and healthcare, they're really at the heart of the current frustration.
Okay, that makes the decision to take this step much clearer. So, thinking about the consequences, what are the potential political ramifications of these bans?
Well, fundamentally, it's a loud call for accountability. By shutting parties out of pride marches, organizers are essentially saying, look, just showing up for a photo op isn't enough anymore. They're demanding real action, a clear commitment to trans rights. It's like saying your spot here has to be earned now through actual support.
And what does that actual support look like? What specific actions are Pride organizers asking for from the parties?
They've been pretty clear, actually. They want parties to actively and publicly back self-ID legislation to make that process more respectful, more straightforward. And crucially, they want solid commitments to improve access to gender-affirming healthcare, more funding, shorter waiting times, removing those unnecessary barriers. It's about policy changes, resources, tangible stuff.
Right. And this must ripple out into the wider political scene. How could these bans affect, say, upcoming elections? Could parties be forced to rethink their approach?
Well, it certainly could be a factor. The LGBTQ+ community is diverse, yes, but it's also a politically aware and engaged part of the electorate. If parties want to win back trust and votes, they might well need to take a serious look at their policies on trans rights. Ignoring these demands could hurt them electorally, especially in places with large LGBTQ+ populations or strong ally networks. It's a form of targeted pressure, really.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to the LGBTQ plus community itself. How have these developments generally been received within the community?
Well, from what we're seeing, there seems to be quite a lot of support for the bans. Many feel it's a necessary step, maybe even overdue, to make parties accountable. There's definitely a shift, you can feel it. Moving away from valuing the symbolic gesture, the flag waving at Pride, towards demanding concrete action that actually improves trans lives. The message is pretty clear. Symbols aren't enough without substance.
Action, not just words, essentially, but like any community, are there different viewpoints? Is it a totally unified front on this?
Well, no community is ever completely monolithic, right? And there are some differing views. You do hear concerns from some people within the community about inclusivity. They might worry that banning parties closes off avenues for dialogue, for engagement, which is a valid point to consider. But the counterargument you often hear is that Pride's roots are in protest. It's meant to be a space for grassroots activism, for highlighting urgent needs, maybe not just a platform for politicians who might not deliver on trans rights anyway.
That's a really important point. Pride as protest versus pride as celebration or platform. So looking forward, what are the potential ways forward? What could political parties do to mend these bridges, to regain that trust?
I think it has to start with genuine engagement, really listening to the concerns of trans people and their allies, not just, surface level listening. Parties need to go beyond the rhetoric and actually commit to legislative changes that support trans rights. That means, yes, progress on self-ID. It means tackling the healthcare crisis. It's about demonstrating that commitment over time, not just during Pride season.
So it's about matching those public statements of values with real, sustained action, not just showing up in June.
Exactly. Building trust takes time, and it's built through tangible progress. It's about showing that these concerns are being treated seriously at the policy-making level.
Dr. Thornton, this has been incredibly helpful for getting to grips with a complex and clearly evolving situation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today on Westferry Times.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It's a really vital discussion.
And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's clear these decisions by Glasgow Pride and others mark a really significant point in the fight for LGBTQ plus rights, especially trans rights. And it highlights that dynamic, sometimes tense relationship between the community and political power. Maybe something to think about is how grassroots movements like this can influence mainstream politics, and that ongoing tension between wanting symbolic representation and needing concrete policy change. Perhaps explore the specific positions different parties and advocacy groups are taking on these issues. Until our next deep dive, thanks for listening.